Welcome to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership, where you'll hear insights and useful strategies, as well as lessons learned from other nonprofit leaders and valuable tips from a variety of experts. Here to help you with the challenges and opportunities you face day after day is your host and nonprofit leadership expert, Sarah Olivieri.
Hello, nonprofit leaders, and welcome to your go-to place for information and inspiration to help you be even more effective. I'm your host, Sarah Olivieri, and you're listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. I have a special guest today, Brandon Peacock, who is the founder of Hit the Ground Running. He is a nonprofit executive director and founder like you. And he has I shouldn't say great, but he has a unique story to tell. And he's become a bit of an expert on using social media to fundraise and gain support and recognition for his organization. Through his leadership, he has helped gain over 40 million views on social media and 130,000 cumulative following in just over a year, building a global community of supporters and survivors. Welcome, Brandon. Before we dive into social media, will you share with our audience briefly a little bit of your story of how you became the founder of Hit the Ground Running?
Yeah, of course. So just to preface, I never anticipated ending up in the not-for-profit space. I was in corporate consulting 5 years ago, and I thought that was the dream. And now I've ended up here, and it's my favorite thing in the world. So really what happened that led to Hit the Ground Running was I got shot 3 times in a drive-by shooting while walking in to get my hair cut about 5 years ago now. I was hit in the left side of my knee, the right femoral artery, which was almost a kill shot, and then the left side of my chest as well, which also was almost a kill shot. So I was very fortunate to come away with both my life and my leg from the incident and have a true fighting chance, I guess, at recovery. And after, when I woke up that next morning in the hospital, I was basically told, you're lucky to be survive, right? You're lucky to have survived the injuries. You're lucky to still be here, but you're probably not going to walk normally again. You're definitely not going to be back to the athlete you were. Just be thankful, I guess, that you're still here. And for me, I took that more of it, I think, as a challenge than, truth, I guess you could say. And then I started building Hit the Ground Running within a few months after the shooting, really along my own journey to recovery. So what ended up happening was my best friend at the time of the shooting, and still my best friend now, is a physiotherapist. And he worked me out 5 to 10 hours a day, 7 days a week for months after the shooting. And we got to the point where I defied all of the odds that my doctors had set for me very quickly. I was back on the ice. I'm Canadian, so I was back playing hockey on the ice within 2 months of the shooting, I think it was. I ran my first 5K about 2.5 months later. I really just shocked everyone, I think, in my medical team. And what became really apparent really quickly was, for trauma survivors who've had their lives altered by these sorts of, just crazy injuries, they're capable of so much more. They're capable of so much more, I think, than the medical system might preface them for, if they have adequate resources and support, right? So I realized that the best way for me to pay forward my friend who helped me recover and eventually helped me run my first marathon just over a year after the shooting was to start Hit the Ground Running and try to fundraise for other trauma survivors to have access to the same resources that I did. So that's where Hit the Ground Running started. We really just started as this kind of, way for me to pay tribute to my best friend. And then 3 years later, now we're a 6-figure fundraiser annually, really almost entirely through social. We do some in community events and stuff too, but with the nature of the work that we do, I'd say 85% of the money that we bring in comes through social. And yeah, it's become a cool little project for me. Definitely not the life I anticipated living 5 years ago, but I'm very happy with it.
I love it. Well, that is the end of your story is great, even if the beginning is really not. And you have really shown brightly in this area of social media, which I think is still, even though we've had social media a while, there's still this oh, social media, you got to do it. But there's definitely ways to waste a lot of time and money doing it and ways to do it better. So when you think about it, before we dive into specifics, at the core of a great social media fundraising strategy, what do you think are those elements that are most important?
Yeah, the single element that's most important, I think, is authenticity, right? We spend so much time overcomplicating the process, especially in the not-for-profit space, when the reality is we have the single greatest piece, think of, we have the single greatest competitive advantage when it comes to using social media as a fundraiser, which is storytelling of incredible stories, right? Like short form media is no different than the media that's existed for the last 100 years,
Yeah.
right? It's all about the stories that you can bring to the table. And when you're in the not for profit space and you're doing good work, there will be hundreds of thousands of people in the world who are ready and willing to connect with your message. You just need to tell it to them properly, right? And I think we live in this space where we overcomplicate this process. We want to follow trends. We want to become influencers. We want to do all of those things. But the reality is, it doesn't matter how many views you have. It doesn't matter how many trends you have if you're not making money and monetizing your audience, right? To drive your cause forward. And, hopping on trends and becoming an influencer isn't necessarily the best way to do that, right?
So true.
It's showcasing the work that you're doing in a way that, you know, every single time somebody sees one of your videos, you have to be treating them like they're just a new top of funnel lead coming into your audience. So yeah, I love it. I've learned a lot over the years. I was very lucky. I had a very close friend of mine who I grew up with, who owned a social media agency when I got shot. I consider him an expert in the space. And I hobbled into a coffee shop 2 months after the shooting, asking him how to document the process. And it helped tremendously. So
Absolutely.
I had a big competitive advantage,
Well,
but yeah, I love this space.
clearly, you have some know-how and knowledge that you have learned. Just to bring everybody else along, there's two terms I'd love to clarify for the audience in case for those who aren't social media marketing lingo folks. You mentioned short form content, and I recently had somebody asking, well, what is short form? What is long form? What's the difference? Would you give folks a few examples of what is short form versus long form content?
Yeah, so short form would be like reels, right? So if you're on Instagram, if you're posting on TikTok, at Facebook Reels as well, YouTube even has a Reels function. Typically, those are going to be under a minute and a half, sometimes a little bit longer if you're on maybe TikTok where they have, additional length to the content that you can create. But I would try to keep those Reels under a minute 30. And the purpose of short form Reels is really top of funnel, right? So if you're successful on Instagram and you start to generate traction, you could have, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of viewers every month coming in and consuming your message, consuming your content. And then you can cycle them into your
Yeah.
community, right? So it really, what I would consider short form content is like short pieces of video that are going to be a lead magnet for your not for profit. Long form content, it could be a couple different things. So in my experience, with the social side, that would be, 5 minute plus TikTok videos. It would be YouTube posts, right? Like those videos where you have a little bit more time to nurture your existing audience and the people who come in. And that's where they kind of maybe fall in love a little bit more with you and your mission. It's like for deeper connections of people who are typically already existing fans of yours, I would say. Whereas short form is like a lead magnet. I would also consider long form, anything that's on TV, for example, like a podcast, media that you've seen for the last 20 years, TV shows, all that stuff. So yeah, people in the not-for-profit space, sometimes they overemphasize the wrong things. I think that short form, when it comes to the media piece, is the most important. I think it's the future. So yeah, those are the two different
Excellent.
avenues
And
though.
you mentioned the other one I was going to ask you about, top of funnel. You also mentioned lead magnet. We're going to take people on a journey, a little social media university here. But I think these are really important concepts that marketers use all the time that don't always make it into nonprofit lingo, which is why I want to take the time and just to throw in for the older generations out there. I think one way to think about short form and long form, or top of funnel and nurturing these words, is it's like the difference between a coffee date and a dinner date. Your coffee date is your short form date that's about, it's not a big commitment. You're just getting to know each other, and your dinner date's your long form date where, there's a little more involved and you're really going to maybe get to know each other better. You're at a different level of comfort. So tell us about top of funnel versus nurturing, just to bring people along this journey.
Yeah. So I mean, to even simplify it more, let's say like for historic not for profit and even modern not for profit, obviously, top of funnel would be like your lead magnet, right? That would be if you get a mailing list, if you have whatever gets you that first point of contact with somebody new who could be a prospective donor, right? And then bring them into that funnel. You now hit them with your marketing emails, right? You hit them with the things that kind of remind them that you're alive and what you're doing, and you try to solicit donations from these people, right? So on social, the reason that short form content is so effective for top of funnel and lead generation is once you start getting good at creating, I'd say probably 50% of your videos are going to be pushed to people who've never seen you before, right? So if I have a video that gets For You page traction, so it starts to go a little bit viral. If I have 100,000 viewers, 50,000 of those people have never heard of or seen me before in a lot of cases, right? And that's where I look at top of funnel as these people have not seen me for the first time. Maybe 10% of those people really like the message. And now they come to my profile. Let's say we'll talk about Instagram here in particular. They really like my message. So they'll come to my Instagram and now they see my pinned videos. So what my pinned videos would be, and just for social, because some people probably don't know, is you pin videos to your profile so that when people come to your profile organically through a video, like a top of funnel type, video, come and you can have these more detailed videos explaining what you're about. So who you are, what your mission is, if you're not for profit. And this is where you have that slightly longer piece of short form content. Maybe it's a minute and a half, and you break down, here are some case studies of the work that I've done. Here is the mission statement. Here is what we are actively doing. And then in that video, you kind of want to have a driver to, let's say, the link in your bio, which would be the next point of the funnel, where people will see where you're fundraising, what your current campaigns are, and all of that stuff. So yeah, I forget what the second word you asked me
Oh,
for
lead
was there,
magnet,
but
lead
that's
magnet. Yeah.
yeah. So the lead magnet, I mean, that could be really different. It's easy if you're a business, let's say, and you have like an offer,
Right.
right? So what a lead magnet would be in the social media space is, let's say you're a marketing agency, you have a free template for 100 hooks or whatever for social media ad videos. That would be your free offer that gets people into your mailing list so you can start to sell to them, right? That's what the lead magnet would be. For the not-for-profit space, it's a little bit more complicated on social, depending, because you really just want to drive them to that fundraising link, right? So in a way, like maybe your fundraising link is kind of your lead magnet there, I guess you could make the argument. But if there's any way that you can create free value or value for people in your community, that would be what your lead magnet would be. And then that way you have their information and you can consistently market to them, right? Like you want to get them off of social media as well as on social media, because especially with some platforms, like if you look at TikTok, for example, you can have 100,000 followers and still get 500 views on videos, right? Like the Instagram is a little bit better of a community platform. And it's why if anyone is listening and they're interested in creating content, don't focus on TikTok. Like we prioritize that last. If you can repurpose your content, send it there. But the modes of creation are a little bit different for what's going to track. I would say focus entirely on Instagram is where
Mhm.
I would go all in, or Facebook as well for older not-for-profit founders that might feel more comfortable on the platform. It's a great fundraising platform as
Yeah.
well.
So, just to fill in for folks, thinking about nonprofit lead magnets, because it is tricky. And I've thought about this before, definitely you can think of a first donation. I always like to think of it as a toe in the water donation, or it could be a little more transactional donation, like you get something, tangible if you give. But also, many nonprofits are experts in subject matter that their donors care about. So you can offer let's say you're a mental health organization, you can offer a guide for talking to someone you care about maybe, whether or not therapy is right for them, or a screening tool, or, whatever resource that you can create as an expert that your folks care about. Maybe you're an environmental organization and you have a guide about backyard composting, or you are, the environmental working group is a great example. They release their dirty dozen and clean 15 lists, so like the the dozen most contaminated foods and the 15 cleanest foods to eat. So these are all things, if you're a nonprofit that's an expert in something, you could create a guide related to it. And probably your donors are going to be interested as well. So you've mentioned a bit about storytelling and being authentic. What do you advise people? What makes a good story? How do you go about creating, let's say, an Instagram reel and tell a story?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways. I think scripting is the single most important thing in the social media side of things. So if there's one thing I really focus on, it's you want to hit three pieces, right? So you want to have a strong hook that's going to, pull somebody who's never seen your content before. It's going to stop them in their tracks, stop them from scrolling and start engaging with your video, right? So, if people watching this are on social media often, a lot of the times our brains kind of turn off and we'll just scroll kind of aimlessly. You need to reignite that, you need to give them a hit of dopamine right away to hook them in, and then you bring them along to the story.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, for a long time, my hook was always just like, I got shot 3 times. And like right there, it's like, oh my, people are intrigued, right? It brings them in. It's why you see some of these UNICEF campaigns, for example, that are like, there is starving kids in Africa and you can change their life. Like that's a strong hook because now they're felt like they're brought into the mission, but it's also, it's shocking, right? So that's the most important part, I'd say, of a video, honestly. Like that's number one, because if you don't get them even into you don't hook them in, they're not going to watch your video. You're not going to be able to get them with the call to action at the end, right? So the second piece is really just the story itself. And that's where you want to break things down into a very easy to understand, concise story, right? So if I was talking about, let's say Isaiah, who's one of the kids that I work with and we support, he was shot as a bystander. He's spinal cord injury now, and we're fundraising to give him access to stem cell therapy and either like physiotherapy, psychotherapy, right? So when I bring people into the story, I want to be concise immediately. He got shot 8 times, but he's got 3 kids and he's working his tail off for them, right? And you slowly just like concise sentence, like line by line by line, that goes from hook to why he's in this situation and what's going on for him, the kind of sad piece. And then you spin it, right? And then you say, but it's not all bad, right? But there's good that we can do, right? And now you start to inspire people to continue to engage and feel hopeful, right? You start to lead them along. So he was shot as a bystander. He's got these 3 beautiful kids that he's fighting for every day. And he's starting to make a little bit of progress. Doctors told him he'd never walk again and he'd never even be able to stand up normally. But 3 months later, now he's able to pop his chest out, right? And now people who are engaged they're not just feeling bad for him because, feeling empathy won't get you donations, right? Like feeling it will, but you need to show that there's a value to that dollar that's coming in that'll make a tangible difference, right? So you go through the story, create that empathy, create that emotion, and then you cycle it to, but now here's what's happening, right? But now because of you, because of what we're doing, he's starting to find that hope, right? And now you bring them through the story in that way, you create that hope. And then at the end, you always need to have a strong call to action, whether that's go check out the link in my bio, whether that's a less obvious plug to that. You always want to be driving people to your donation page, because when people are scrolling on social media, they need to be directed, right? Your brain is kind of off, right? And I think some people feel maybe a little bit afraid to do that because they feel like they're selling or something like that. But the reality is, if someone's made it to the end of your video and they're inspired, even if you convert 1 in every 100 people, if you get, at 20,000 views, that starts to add up really quick, right? And as you scale, it continues to add. So driving them to that link in bio is extremely, like, there would be no value otherwise, right? You need to make sure you're monetizing that audience. And a lot of the time the viewers understand that too, right? Like they know that they want to be a part of the mission, right? So you need to make sure you're giving them some sort of, action point as well. So there's a lot of ways that you could overcomplicate that process and start to play around with it and really do different things. But if you made every video, that you're doing patient story wise like that, I guarantee with 100% certainty, eventually one will blow up. If you posted the same video slightly different every day, but you had a great storyline, it'll happen eventually, like within 60 days. I guarantee it. And the one piece I'll say too, there's one that I want to add on to that with the story is we overcomplicate them sometimes. Like I was saying
Yeah.
with what we do about everything, we want these like theatrical cinematic shots. We want it to be so polished, but that often takes away from the authenticity piece that we talked about at the start, right? I've tried videos that are super, elegant. We'll do like this beautiful podcast, this beautiful background and this $20,000 cinema camera. And it's so sharp, but it doesn't gravitate on social
Yeah.
media, right? It doesn't track. And it's because people, they don't connect with it as much. They want to see the authentic B-roll of the progress. They want to see, when the patient you were helping was in the hospital and it was just a video of he or she, on their hospital bed, smiling and talking to their mom, right? Like, well, the story is being told about how tough their situation is. And then they want to see, him or her standing up and like walking for the first time. They want to see that, they don't want to see this super polished $50,000 video that was put together. They want to see the authentic human
Yeah.
that they're helping. And sometimes we overcomplicate the process, I think, because we're fearful of being rejected for lower quality. But in the end, I think it actually has the inverse effect in many
I couldn't
cases.
agree more. And it's not just authenticity. I think it's the context of the platform, right? And you always in marketing have to ask yourself, what's the context of this space? And in digital, like we have to we don't always intuit it, right? When we're in person, we intuit very quickly, like the context, like, oh my God, am I at a fancy restaurant? Am I in the backyard with my family? And we adjust our behavior. But on digital, like, because we're not there and fully surrounded, we have to really like turn on our conscious brains to think about the context and the context of most social media, like you said, especially, Facebook and Instagram. It's about documenting our lives and being in a community and a journey, right? Together. It's about those little moments throughout life. It's not the space where we certainly people are showing off a version of their lives, but it's not where we put on our formal show outfit, right? If you will. Like, maybe at your gala, that's where you might want to play the trailer of your nonprofit. But in your local social media, right, that's not really the right place for it. It doesn't fit in. And therefore it's also not authentic in that way.
Well, and in the perspective of donors too, I think one thing that's important is, people want to feel like they have an impact on what you're doing,
Yeah.
right? And if you see this super polished, intense production that's being put out together and you can intuitively tell that the production value was high, right? It was an expensive piece to put
Yep.
together. You might not feel that your support is as meaningful there as it might be somewhere
Yeah,
else, right? Like
totally.
you really, it alienates the audience a little bit in that way. And I think what a lot of not-for-profits I see do is they create TV commercials and then repurpose the same style on social. And it doesn't translate well.
Yeah.
But yeah, save it for the galas and the TV screens, because there is great ways to do that. There is companies who do that exceptionally well, but it's just not the
Yeah.
same. It's very
I
different.
love it. So let's talk about, social media for fundraising. We've got to monetize. We've got to turn these into dollars. What are your tips for folks around, we talked about call to action, but let's take it a little further about how do we actually bring in the bucks from our social media campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways. I think the single thing that changed everything for me, I think my first 30 million views, I probably fundraised under $1,000, like almost nothing. And then over the next 10 or 15 million, we legitimately fundraised six figures, right? And the only real changes we made were the call to action, like I said, which is extremely important. We prioritize different platforms. So for example, on TikTok, we had a ton of views, but converted very little. And the reason for that is TikTok is like a learning platform. It sounds really weird to classify it as that, but it's a storytelling platform, right? So you listen and it's why people who are on TikTok create these like yapping style videos where they just talk into a mic. It's very low production quality and it does well, but it's more of like a consumption platform where you're not going to the individual's profile. You're just scrolling to the next page, right? It's not a community platform. It's a consumption platform. Instagram is a community platform. There still is a component of consumption, but it's a community-centric platform. You're actually going and engaging with the creators. You see their content once you've followed them. Your audience is just much easier to monetize there. Same with Facebook. They're both easier to monetize. But once you've got that call to action, you've brought them into the funnel, they come click on the link in your bio. You got to make sure the link in your bio is also optimized for fundraising, right? That was one of the biggest changes that we found, success-wise, was we integrated Fundraise app software into our Squarespace software. And we built like a beautiful checkout page where you can see recent donations. You have the credibility piece. You have your fundraising, barometer, like goal set there. And you also get to retell the story that probably brought the viewer to your website, right? And you want to eliminate drop-off points too. So we have it so simple that you go to the website, you see this big, beautiful picture of the current campaign that's going on, in this case, Isaiah, who you see him and his family, and they're being resilient and they're pushing through. And then you have this strong, good copyright that really tries to enforce, this is why your donation will make a difference, right? And then the conversion to, from there is just, you click, $20 donation, $40 donation, whatever it is. We actually have the website preset. So based on the user spending patterns, they have custom set donation links. That most softwares that you integrate will be able to do that now, which has really been beneficial
Right.
for us. And then the single biggest change we actually made on the back end was we integrated Apple Pay. Because when you're using short form content as a funnel to bring new people into your audience,
You're on your phone.
you're on your
Yeah.
phone, right? 99% of the people who are engaging with us are on their phone. So if you double tap, it's just one less area where you might lose somebody, right? You got to go get your credit card. You can't find it. It's a huge pain. You don't know the numbers off the top of your head. You'll lose, even if it's 5% of the individuals you're bringing into your audience, that starts to add up really quickly, right? So making that process as seamless as possible. Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say I think 75% of our transactions are Apple Pay now. And it was the biggest difference. I know a lot of not-for-profits, what they'll do is they'll have their, donation link on their website, or it'll take them to, like, in Canada Helps, or some similar American, entity. And it's just not, I don't know, it's not seamless. It's not user-friendly.
Right.
And I get it. It's complicated to do for some people, but you could pay someone probably $1,000 to build out these softwares for you to build out your website. And I guarantee you'll make that money back, without question.
I totally agree. I used to build
so
websites, and I can't advocate enough. You must have total control over your donation pages. You cannot and I used to interview as the various software companies came out. And I used to interview them, to see if I could recommend any to clients. And I would ask them what research they'd done around landing page, donation page optimization to come up with their layout. And nobody had done any. So they are dishing up fundraising donation pages that are just, some web developer who knows nothing about fundraising just put something together. They're not optimizing. So you need to be able to have control and optimize. Put that out there really strong, folks.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that happens too, and it ties really back into like the content creation space, is because the work that we do is so noble and we're often so passionate about it, we forget that not everybody is as passionate about what we do as we are. Right. So, like, obviously I got shot. I'm a trauma survivor. I deeply care about the community that I represent, but 99.9% of the population hasn't been shot. It hasn't gone through what I've been through, thankfully. So they might not care about my organization as much as I do. It's my job to bring them into that funnel and assume that none of them know what we're doing yet. None of them know why this is important, and bring them along that journey, right? And when you're creating content on social media, it's why you need to view everything from the lens of an outsider. You actually kind of have to be hypercritical on yourself to think, if I was scrolling social media, would I understand this piece if I didn't know anything about the organization or, what they're doing, right? And when you're building out a landing page, you need to keep that in mind as well. You need to make sure that it's not just you talking to your already existing community, but it's you talking to somebody who's never heard of you before and has no idea who you are, why what you do is important. And if you can master that, I think you can be successful, because the work that we do is so important. And, if you care deeply about something, there is a large group of people who do as well. You just need to find them and convince them it's important.
I love it. I would love to wrap up there because there have been so many pieces of gold, but I just have to highlight one more thing that I think is so important in what you've been talking about is you mentioned your current campaign is Isaiah, I think his name was, right? And I think so
Yeah.
many people, when they think about fundraising campaigns, they think about their year end giving or something that's calendar or what their Giving Tuesday campaign is. And to have campaigns that are essentially around case studies is so smart because you're going to get the most aligned, valuable. An aligned donor is a valuable lifetime donor. And it works all year round and it's always going to be unique to you. So I think that is so smart. And I hope folks will like follow some of your campaigns and think about how to apply that to their own work to have something unique, a unique case study based, if for lack of a better better term, way to organize campaigns and think about that. And it sounds like your own story was your first campaign. Have you done many others?
Yes. Yeah, we've done a few. We've probably done 4 or 5 different unique campaigns now. They're challenging too, especially with the nature of the industry that we're in, where for Isaiah, for example, like we'll need to fundraise like 80 to 100,000 to take care of him for stem cells and for therapy, just for the one stem cell procedure and 1 year of therapy. So it can be it would be much easier to pump out 20 campaigns a year, give $1,000 to each person, and just drive our views up huge. So if you have a ton of patient stories, like do as many of those as possible because that's where your engagement will come from, like 100% of the time. But obviously, it depends, on how much each individual patient costs to support. But there's no other way you connect with your audience better, right? I think, like people want to support a not for profit because of the work that you're doing, not because they might get a free T-shirt or a free mug or something like that, right? And a lot of not for profit leaders don't like hearing that sometimes because it adds a little bit more, complications to the way that they do things. And it obviously depends on the nature of your organization as well, right? If you have a ton of funding, it might be a little bit different the way you approach it than a bootstrap not for profit who's just starting out, right? But patient stories, and more patient stories, I think, are the key to success.
I love it. Well, any final words of wisdom for our audience and how and who should get in touch with you if they're thinking, oh my God, I want to do this, but I'm looking for some help?
Yeah, I mean, nothing that comes to mind for final words. I think the thing that I try to think about the most, and people don't always like to hear it, but I think it's really important is, like I said before, no one on the outside cares about your not for profit as much as you do. And that's a good thing because it means you can sell it. It means you can convince the world of how important it is. But you need to remember that when people are consuming your content, your information, everything you put out, you're roping them in. You're not just already, telling them what they know is important, right? Like with social media, 95% of your content should be geared towards your new demographic of donors, right? I think it's just the easiest way to fundraise. It will give you the most success. And also at the end of the day, it's going to help the people you care about the most, which is the community you represent. So that's really important. For me, obviously, Hit the Ground Running is a huge part of my life. If anyone wants to look at that and see what we do, our website is www.htgrcharity. It's like hitthegroundrunningcharity.com. And then I'm also working on building out a consulting platform for not-for-profits to help with the social strategy side. And really, that's because I want to get to a point where Hit the Ground Running, I don't have to pay any salary to myself or anyone involved. I want it to be a full free project where we fundraise a ton of money every year. So Hit the Ground Running is kind of like my own case study to prove, I guess, my understanding of the social space and kind of drive my mission forward. So we're building out a community called Not for Profit University simultaneously right now, where we've got, I want to say probably 60 or 70 like short form to like middle long form videos coming out, basically just talking about social strategy, how to improve your fundraising, going into a little bit more detail about some of the stuff that we talked about today, and just teaching people how to monetize their audience and grow their audience a little bit more effectively, with the goal of making the world a little bit better of a place in mind. Because I think when the not-for-profit community learns how to do what some businesses already know how to do effectively when it comes to taking over the internet a little bit, the world becomes a better place. And that's what's important. So if anybody listening is in that, not-for-profit space and wants to get added to our wait list, just email me, Brandon, Brandon at htgrcharity.com, and I'll add you into our waiting list. We should be launching about late November, early December.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Brandon. And thank you out there for listening, but also for all that you do to make our communities better. This podcast is here for executive directors, board members, and nonprofit leaders like you to help you reach your full potential, because I know you care so deeply, like Brandon does, about your missions. I've walked in your shoes myself. I've been an executive director multiple times, founder, board member, conference coordinator, and everything in between. And now I'm here to offer guidance, encouragement, and practical tips to boost your impact. If you would like even more insights, you can go to inspirednonprofitleadership.com/sign up for my weekly newsletter, where you will get bite-sized, highly actionable tips for nonprofit leaders. And don't forget to subscribe and particularly leave a review for this podcast on whatever platform you are listening to it on, because that is what in podcast world helps other viewers find this show. The platforms will dish it up to them based on partly on how many subscribes and especially how many reviews it gets. So it would mean a lot, not just to me, but to the listeners out there who would benefit from such tips if you did that. Until next time, all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.